Welcome back, friends. We talked a little bit about historical context of education, um, how it has changed with modern times, being away so much of the time for the children away from the home of the family. And I think one of the things, there's been some good things to this event. And one, for some, has been that parents have discovered, one, that they had time to be at home, because they really do. Everybody now has to be at home. And for some, they realized that they really did enjoy being with their children. Mm-hmm. And they really did enjoy learning, in some cases, with their children. In other cases, they're actually having to teach their children. And it was that process over a significant amount of time that has led to, the desire to try and give this homeschooling concept a go. Another thing that I think has been, for me, it was one of the attractions of homeschooling was simplification. And certainly during this event, a lot of lifestyles have become simplified. There's been no fancy vacations, no expensive sporting games, no summer camps, no going out to restaurants, at a whim, very limited shopping, no malls, just so much has been simplified for us. And that in itself has also created another opportunity for parents and their children to get to know each other. Now, I do know, I was just looking at frontline doctors, and they were talking about, the negative consequences with some of this. And so I'm not oblivious to the other side of the real societal effects of the lockdown. But we're trying to put, though, is more of the positive and more of the truth. And the truth is, even though their spousal abuse is up, or domestic abuse or whatever, and with the children's up, and suicide's up, and it is, the lockdowns have had a serious effect, not just money. But the other is also true, too. Parents have discovered, it took some time. They had to figure out, the kids' math and so forth. But they got over the hurdle because enough time was put on them to get to that joy phase of it. And for some parents, they've had their eyes opened as to what was going on in classrooms that they may not have been aware of prior. Just like I did, right? When I brought home the twins for 7th grade, my eyes were open to, what do you mean that's what you were doing? Right. And I was one of those room moms. I was one of the ones up there bringing up the cupcakes that you were talking about. And Sarah also commented, parents are the primary educators of their children. And I'm going to quote from the church. Since parents have given children their life, they are bound by the most serious obligation to educate their offspring, and therefore must be recognized as the primary and principal educators. So, let's see. Yes, we have plenty of time. So, Sarah, if a person, where would you advise them to start? Let's say you have a friend, a contact. What should they think about? What should they start? What do they do? Where do they begin?
Sorry, I'm just getting to the door. Anytime that I have ever been asked that question, I always say to them, the very first thing that you as the parent have to do is determine, you have to separate inside of your thoughts, your head reason and your heart reason for why you're doing this. And the reason behind that is that we all know that the reason why we're educating our kids is because we want for our children to grow in age, grace, and wisdom, right, before God and before man, right? We all know that. This is our overriding head goal, right? but everybody also has to have a very strong heart goal. And that has to be motivated sincerely by an authentic love of your child, because there's going to come a day where nobody wants to work anymore. Nobody wants to, this is too hard, you're fighting, your kids are all, everybody, their entire house is in turmoil. You can't think of the last time that you were able actually to start the washing machine, wash the clothes, move it to the dryer, put it into a basket, fold it, and put away all in one day, right? I mean, all of these things that, you had taken for granted, for so many years, suddenly all of these things become a turmoil, and, you just want peace. But you have to ask yourself at that moment, this is when you leave your head reason, because you think somebody certainly could do this better than I'm doing, right? And you have to really draw deeply on that well of that heart reason, because really the church tells you concretely, no one can do it as well as you. You are the primary educator. And so no one can love your child the way that you love them. No one can know your child as well as you know them. No one knows their emotional needs. No one knows their strengths. No one knows their weaknesses. And in addition to that, no one is willing to push them past their weaknesses like you are. And so that's the first place, is to really ask yourself what my heart reason is behind doing this. And I know that that's probably not exactly what most people were thinking I was going to say, go to the internet, look up these kind of books, look up kind of that, right? No, really, you must know that. And you have to embrace that. It's almost, I do think in some instances, and I think that this vocation is open to everyone who is married, who has been blessed with children, right? So it's not so much a vocation within a vocation, right, to educate your children, because that's our primary responsibility, right? If we have children, we have a right to educate them because we have a duty to do so, right? That right comes from our duty. But there can be, we can look upon, we always have that opportunity for subsidiarity, right? What I can do, I do myself. And then when you can't do that, you can go out and you can reach out to the community to assist you in that, right? And so when you're doing this, when you're examining your reasonings behind doing this, I want every parent to recognize that there's nothing special about me, right? There's nothing, I have been given, it's particularly if you've been married within the Catholic Church, there was no special sacramental grace that was poured over my head, right? That made it possible for me to do this. But what makes it possible for me to do this is, one, I recognize that God has asked me to do this, to become one with him in the cooperation of educating the children. And two, that if he's called me to do something, he's going to give me the ability to do it.
He equips those he calls.
Right.
And it goes back to a little bit what I said the prior episode, is that we would all really like to have measured results before we start. And then our faith would be, well, really, would it be faith then, would it? Because we know that we could get it done.
Right.
And the Lord doesn't often work that way. It's not like we're trying to be imprudent, or we don't have, trying to use our reason as best we can. But that's often really not how he does things. He gives us children, and then we figure it out as we go along,
right,
type thing.
Right. And then from that, obviously that's the more esoteric reason. But then there are very important civil matters that you have to know about. And so I do think that HSLDA, the Homeschool Legal Defense Fund, is probably a really important primary resource for people to look at. It's, again, called the Homeschool Legal Defense Fund, HSLDA. They are basically in the service of people to help protect the rights of parents to be able to educate their kids. At this point, it seems kind of silly that you would think that somebody would have to protect that right, but it is always a little bit under threat from certain people who don't like, they don't like the loss of control of the children, right? When I was saying that the normative form of education that people have become accustomed to is the child out of the parent's home from 8 o'clock in the morning until 3:30 in the afternoon. And so this is the normative thing. And so when you put the child back into an environment like that, certain people get nervous, right? Which, perhaps because we've kind of done that to ourselves, maybe there is some, legitimacy to address those concerns. But the Homeschool Legal Defense Fund is going to be a really good resource. The page itself permits you to search your own independent states so that you can find out what the actual requirements are when you're going to homeschool. For most schools and for most states, parents do have the right to withdraw their children at any time during the school year, as long as they notify the appropriate school administrators, and as long as they meet the requirements that individual school boards have voted on to, maybe show proof of progress. Some districts will ask that you take a standardized test. That might suffice. Some school districts will ask that you have a portfolio that is assessed by an actual teacher. Some states are going to have requirements that if you don't have a college degree, there will be a list of approved programs that you must choose from. Or if you have a college degree, then you might be given a wider latitude to be able to create your own curriculums. But those would be the two primary areas that I would recommend that people start with. First, to examine their own heart, to know why they're doing this, and then to begin to explore what their legal requirements are for them. Because when you're engaging in this, the very last thing that you want to have happen to you is to have a truancy officer, come and knock on your door and have a situation that could be easily prevented simply by knowing what your obligations are before the law, and also knowing what your rights are before the law.
That is excellent. Excellent advice.
Well, thank you.
And we will continue with the next episode. To the next time, Fides et Ratio.